Something you rarely see these days in the MTV-generated music industry mainstream. Hip-hop with a message of raw truth. Felipe Coronel, better known as Immortal Technique, is a Peruvian-born, Harlem-raised hip-hop artist and political activist. A self-described social guerrilla, Tech's views about politics, religion, classism, and racism are expressed poetically and powerfully through his lyrics. And some of his albums pack more historical relevance than an entire school history book. To maintain control over his work, Tech has never signed with a label, which gives him ultimate freedom of expression. He's a vocal supporter of many political movements and struggles for justice. Since the Occupy Wall Street movement started last year, he's been an active voice of support for the cause. And now a new documentary coming out July 10th gives us an intimate look at his life, music, and activism. Here's a sneak peek.
You symbolize the voice of truth all around the world in the name of rap music and hip-hop.
If I was somewhere else simply because of the music I made, then there was nowhere it couldn't take me.
Can I have a platform where I can still be me, tell my truth, and make some money so I can take care of my life? There's a reason that picks this pen up.
Immortal Technique is one of the most dangerous artists in America.
To join me now in studio to discuss more about his beliefs and his work is Immortal Technique himself. Thanks for coming in studio,
Thank you
Tech.
very much. I appreciate your time.
Why do you think that politically conscious hip-hop is not more in the mainstream today?
The reality of this is that it wasn't always that way. That in the during the birth of hip-hop and then subsequently about a decade afterwards, there was always a presence of that griot voice, that voice of truth, whether it was Public Enemy and others, X-Clan, individuals who brought these taboo subjects, these things that were supposed to be resolved by civil rights struggles, which were never resolved, things like racism and classism, unspoken truths, the black eye of America, things that I felt were necessary to describe, especially in an age where we're at war with an idea of terrorism, rather than the causes of such a thing. So I think that for me, it was important to maintain as much control over my art form as possible, which is why I chose to be independent and become the label myself, as opposed to signing with a large corporation that would then have a process of approval over the work that I do. And honestly, you know, would probably make a lot less money per unit. And that's always good to have more economic control as well. I think someone said it best, you can't have political sovereignty without having economic sovereignty.
Indeed. What do you think changed in the industry, though? I mean, you're saying, you know, we had Wu-Tang and all these people that you're talking about now, and it just seems like now it's so manufactured. Mm-hmm. Do you think that it's an element or a mechanism of control to keep kids kind of out of touch with these subjects?
You know, I'm not responsible for that far-reaching conspiracy theory, but I think that there are a group of people who feel that the corporate system specifically targeted that sort of message and said, no, we want to turn this into an entertainment form. You know, and in entertainment, you know, if you don't like the idea that they did that with that, then you're not going to like what they do with TV either. The way they tell people, oh, you know what? No, honey, you're too fat. You're going to have to go throw up somewhere in order to be on television. Or, you know what, bro, you know, we want to put this on you, or, you know, you're going to play this sort of character. Everything, you know, it's turned into almost a caricature of itself. Not that everything is like that. Just saying that in the majority of mainstream things that you'll find, it's kind of built around that. They found a cookie cutter, the same way Hollywood did, you know? Hollywood got tired of doing original stuff, so they said, hey, let's just remake all this stuff from the 80s, and then we're gonna rape a bunch of cartoon series and make this come to life, and, you know, the kid and everyone who's 30 or 40 will go see it now. Now, mind you, they do this in a very, very creative way sometimes, and sometimes it's a flop. So it's just hit and miss. And I think that for me, the way that it was explained when I was a lot younger was that hip-hop always had these two characteristics. In the same way, you know, on a plantation, people sang songs not because they felt happy of being there, but because they imagined another life. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home, to take me to another life. And then there was a different slave that said, no, man, this plantation is, we're gonna get out of here right now. So in hip-hop, not everybody wants to hear misery and chaos and destruction. Sure, we want to party, we want to dance, but there has to be a balance, because we cannot become a caricature of ourselves. People cannot be defined by one specific tiny thing that happens to be a piece of who they are. And I think that marginalization was given free range by the industry rather than being curtailed and held to a higher standard.
And talking about just corporations wanting to maximize their profits, and that's really why we see a lot of the ills in this world, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming Bilderberg Group coming up this weekend in Chantilly. When you think of groups like this, the Trilateral Commission, all of these New World Order elitist establishments, think tanks, let's say, do you think that there's a more sinister thing going on, that there's this nefarious group of people trying to control or dominate the globe? Or do you just look at it, like you just said, and just say, it's just a group of rich elitists trying to maximize company profits from all across the spectrum?
Well, I think that when you discuss it, you don't need to use these ideas of that a fanatic would rely on to say, hey, maybe they're planning some secret attack or something. No, but all corporations are a nation unto themselves. They're defined as a human being, even though the majority of them, and practically all of them, are soulless. And I think that at some point, when you approach that level of understanding, you can excuse it in that manner. You can say, oh yeah, this is just a business, this is just how they make money, but real people's lives are being affected. There's almost seems to be a meticulous strategy to keep anything that is thought-provoking out of the mainstream. And that's a shame. And I think that there's a new generation of MCs that are coming up now, which make a different type of music, and I think that's good to hear. I think that we need that sort of diversity in hip-hop to be a resurgence of the culture. Now, is it a corporation that decides these things for human beings? It doesn't need to be a secret society. McDonald's ain't gonna tell you the recipe for what they have, or how they make the fry. These things are secret. We don't even know the ingredients that's in the food. America makes it incredibly difficult for people to understand the genetically modified things that they're consuming, and a lot of times, it's been a struggle to even get them to label it that. So if they're so keen on keeping a secret the food that could potentially cause cancer in people, do you think that they would give an inkling of thought to what could potentially be dangerous about words that are said in music that people listen to? They don't care.
Yeah, I mean, what about the regulatory bodies that people rely on to pass these foods onto the public? I mean, why do you think that there is...
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Or the idea that, that this country is led by moral leaders, by people who are distinctly above in terms of their decision-making capabilities than others. I mean, when you see them talk in Congress, you obviously can tell that a lot of these people are incredibly uncultured and uncouth. So when the finger is pointed at hip-hop for being the cause of these things in the youth, always remember that when you point a finger, there are three fingers pointing back at you.
Art reflects life. I mean, let's talk about, you talk about false flags a lot, and you talk about these perpetrated acts of terror by our own government onto the rest of the world and onto our society. Why do you think it is that people just don't question this conventional wisdom? Like you're saying, I mean, Americans are so, it seems like, blissfully unaware of these things.
I wouldn't say that,
on.
That's a common misconception to me, that America is somehow more ignorant than the rest of the world. I think that an interesting analogy could be made. Let's say there's a homeless person who's an alcoholic lying in the middle of the street. Who is his alcoholism really affecting besides himself, tearing his own life apart? Now let's take a different person, a school bus driver taking your kids and my kids to school. Who does his alcoholism affect? A hell of a lot more people, a hell of a lot more lives. If someone's going to be ignorant in some small town in the middle of Siberia, or some, rural village, pick a continent, who is their ignorance truly affecting? But whose ignorance is truly affected when you have someone that invades the wrong country, or decides that, these are acceptable casualties or collateral damage, or there's no even conversation about who drones are really hitting? I think at that point, our ignorance is just more for the public's display than other people's. And since we're driving the world as a school bus driver, then our ignorance affects a lot more people's lives than anybody else's. But I don't think that Americans are naturally more ignorant. I think that they have a lot more things to pacify themselves with than other countries. And I think that plays into a little bit of the apathy that takes place when we talk about human rights and real tangible things that affect people in other places.
Sure, it's more mirrored back to us in our own culture. The conditioning of our media really is certainly more penetrated in our society than other countries. But I wanted to talk to you a little about the Occupy Wall Street movement. I know that you've been a vocal supporter of it. If you look back at history, though, I mean, There really hasn't ever been an organic uprising. We see in Vietnam, it was the draft that really was the catalyst for people to get out. And now our military is privatized, and I don't really see there being that catalyst or that driving force. What do you think that it's possible to have a peaceful, nonviolent revolution in the face of the biggest military in the world?
I think that there could be enough pressure put on a government by people in order to influence change. I think that the impossible is possible. You know, the United States fought Vietnam and lost. You know, Russia fought Afghanistan and lost. You know, if those things are possible, then why can't awakening people and making them not just believe everything I say or you or anybody else says, but rather asking them to question everything that they're told and critically think and make that be the one thing that's associated with Americans? That's the catalyst that we need in order to create the change that we want. To say, does this pass the litmus test where we can honestly say this is logical and this is reasonable and this is humane? Do we have a double standard forever? Is that how we're going to live? Claiming that we don't sponsor terrorism and we don't torture people? You know, for the rest of the world that examines what goes on, do you know what it looks like? It doesn't look like we're at war with radical Islam. It doesn't look like we're at war with communism. It looks like we're at war with people that say no to us.
So we're talking about the propagandists who put forward this conventional wisdom, and you're talking about the litmus test against that.
And I'm saying that it's interesting that people who are so pro-war are the ones that had every opportunity and took every deferment in order to not serve their country. And yet they're the ones that are so in favor of sending our troops abroad on these military excursions. And I think that one of the saddest things is people don't realize that even though the casualty count may be significantly less than a conflict like Vietnam, that people are still returning very hurt and very injured. And it's not the sons and daughters of the individuals clamoring for war. And even if we talk about the presidential race, everybody on that stage, pretty much except Ron Paul, was a non-veteran. And here's a guy who was, you know, vocally opposed to empire building and sending our men and women into these needless encounters and saying, you know, we're justifying this, and we can choose a very eloquent way to say it. But at the end of the day, what are we really spending American money and American power? And more importantly, and it's very sad but true, the actual fabric that makes up the believability of what we tell people. Because now nobody trusts, and not that nobody, but a lot less people trust us than first after 9/11, when we said, you know, we want to get the people that are responsible for this. This could happen in any country. And quickly it became almost looked at as an excuse to be able to do whatever we wanted all over the world, when it should have never been that. It should have been the complete opposite. It should have been the wake-up call for us to realize that, you know, whatever we put into the world has definitive consequences. And that if we're at war with terrorism, then we have to be at war with the things that cause terrorism. You know, terrorism is the right answer, the wrong answer to the right question. The right question is, why do we live like this? Why are there two standards of living for people? Why am I oppressed because of what my parents raised me to be in terms of a Muslim or a Christian or what political persuasion I have? The wrong answer is to kill innocent civilians over it. And even the more wrong answer is to have the counter-revolutionary strategy of just killing civilians in general and claiming that they're combatants and that your robot accidentally hit the wrong people.
It's a clear case of American exceptionalism. I mean, you're right, we did almost exactly the opposite of what we should have done after 9/11.
If you don't like the American justice system, I always tell people, you're not going to like the Chinese one. You know, if you don't like an American prison, you're going to like a Russian one even less. But I think that we make these criticisms out of, or I do, I can only answer for myself, I make these criticisms out of the love for a country that I can see being a better place. You know what I mean? When you have a child, or if you have a child, and you tell your child not to steal something, or you hit your child, it's not out of hatred. You don't want to destroy your child's life, but you honestly believe that he can be a better person than that, or she shouldn't be raised to think that that's the solution to every problem. You know, and that's what we're doing here. And the people that don't want to see America evolve, the people that don't want to see America change, are typically the individuals that are fattening themselves off the corruption of how dysfunctional the system exists as now.
You were talking about Ron Paul earlier, and I just wanted to ask you why you think, the organic Tea Party, not the manufactured astroturfing that the corporate media hijacked, but the organic Tea Party movement with Ron Paul's ideals behind it, and then the Occupy Wall Street movement. Why is there such a schism between the two? Do you think that this is all mechanized divisions between the two groups? I mean, how come they can't just band together? We have a lot more in common than we do differently.
I think that's definitely true. I think more conversation should actually be taking place between those people that are quote unquote anti-government. And then you'll see who really is anti-government, who really is anti-war. Because the same criticism can be made of the left when they had all these huge anti-war rallies during the Bush administration. And now during the Obama administration, you see who's still down with the cause and who's not. The truth cuts both ways.
What do you think about Obama's presidency? Is it more of an abysmal failure than you ever expected?
That's an interesting straw man argument, but I think that Obama.
I'm sorry, were you a supporter of it?
No, it's not a question. It's not so much a question as being a supporter. It's just that I went into what he was saying with an open mind, whereas a lot of other people approached it with a lot more cynicism and said, oh man, this is just in the same. And of course, I kept a healthy amount of cynicism, but I was really looking forward to seeing him address some of the things that he hasn't even touched on, like immigration. Those the important things that are pretty much the backbone of the economy of this country. We might not run America, but we make America run. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that and to realize that, you can't, like I said in the song on the Martyr, you can't, conquer people and build a country on top of them and then feel offended that they breathe the same oxygen. The Southwest always had a gigantic population of indigenous people. Even the Native American tribes, they never surrendered to Mexico. Mexico couldn't conquer all of them. They were still standing defiant as their own independent nation. So when America won that shill of a war and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in 1848, I think at some point, they can make the case for saying, how can someone else surrender my land for me? The same way after the Revolutionary War, the British ceded territory that did not belong to them. How do you have the right to give people Ohio? It's not yours. You just showed up here acting like this all belongs to you. It's a continuous reminder for me and the people of Latin America when they look at global politics and the United States' role that, our enemy, or rather our revolution doesn't have to do so much with communism or socialism. That at first our revolution had to do with democracy, and the great proselytizer of democracy was America when they said we could have our own presidents. But when we discovered that the great patriarch of democracy was the same one supporting all of these horrible dictatorships all over Latin America so they could squeeze all the natural resources out of it, we started to look for other options, And I'm not here to denigrate anybody's ideas, but Black and Latino people didn't need a Russian ideologue or a European ideologue to come to the dark jungles of Latin America and explain to us the complex concept of sharing. We got that one about 2,000 years ago. And what our real revolution is the reclaiming of our culture and our heritage. And when we realized that one person wasn't doing that, we looked for other options on the table. And I think that it's pretty clear to me that when we make these criticisms, that it's important for us to have that open dialogue. And just like you said before, it's a shame that those two people aren't talking to each other. I'm always open to have a conversation. It doesn't matter if someone was raised as a conservative, as an evangelical, we're still all human beings. I'm in no position to judge you because I'm not God, and you're not God either, so you're in no position to judge me. So at some point, can't we have a rational, respectful dialogue?
What about taking the conversation out of these old school paradigm ways of thinking, communism, socialism, capitalism? I mean, do you think that we're evolved enough now that we can maybe form something new? It just seems like these systems keep failing us over and over again. And the current form of capitalism we have now is completely unsustainable.
Well, it's not really even capitalism. Capitalism would involve some sort of free trade and not a monopoly everywhere. There are all these gigantic corporations that come to the quote-unquote third world. They do anything and everything to prevent people from having, workers' rights. They do anything and everything from stifling any competition that would come from any, local person looking to refine oil or a local company looking to mine for diamonds. If it was really true capitalism, it wouldn't be an absolute monopoly.
But isn't that the inevitability of the
That's
way
an arguable
free market
point. I think that some people would say different. That some people would say that they need competition for growth or change, or that if the political climate isn't stable, again, using a series of very, very articulate and modern arguments to try and justify something very old and very plain to someone who's willing to look at the emperor who's not wearing any clothes anyway.
Going back to Obama really quickly, what do you think about this Orwellian kind of rhetoric that we see in this country right now? I mean, we have a Nobel Peace Prize winner having an assassination kill list that he's overseen, which includes multiple U.S. citizens.
Right. I think everyone in the world is guilty of trying to get at somebody for saying something about them or doing something to them. I mean, it wasn't very long ago in London, someone caught a beryllium pellet full of polonium. So it's not like we can't all be guilty of these horrible things. And I hate to make light of it because it's not funny. But the sad part is that the complete breakdown of the political structure in general is what we're at the doorstep of. That I think that whether it's people opposed to Putin or whether it's people opposed to Obama or whether it's anybody, they're just tired of seeing the contemporary idea of what a government should look like. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that there really is no such thing as a government. It's just people that rule over other people, and they make up these elaborate systems to protect them and keep them behind, some drawn curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, as if they're intangible, when they're people just like everybody else, and that their mistakes and their miscalculations and their laziness has cost millions of people's lives. And they just see it as collateral damage, the ends to the means, until it happens to their family. And then it's not collateral damage, then it's terrorism. Then we need to launch drones and airstrikes and do all these things to guarantee safety that isn't guaranteed by these things.
Why do you think all these provisions after 9/11 were put into place? I mean, do you think that they're rushing to set up some sort of police state, some could say, to plan for something? Or is it just smart in their eyes to kind of ramp up the security industrial complex because they have the ability to and they have the power behind them? I
feel, touching on that point, it's not so much what they want to do now, but perhaps what they'll be launching in the future. For example, the Monroe Doctrine was used to justify the Spanish-American War. The idea that no one from Europe should be deciding the happenings on this hemisphere, and that we wouldn't be the political pawn of some European entity. And yet we then turned the Caribbean and Guam and parts of the Pacific into our political pawn. So it's not so much what the Patriot Act can do immediately now, but what it could be used for potentially in the future, which is what is the true concern of mine.
True concern also of a lot of people, I think, is the fact that we are in a global system, a global economic system, and we see these recessions happening, and I think a lot of people are worried about how we can stand up to not only the greatest military source in the world, but also the entire global system of governance that is being set up or is just integrated with one another. I mean, how do we even do that? Where do we even start? Is it just a fight of the mind?
I think what's interesting about that theoretical question is that we're going to have to tangibly deal with that more and more and in multiple dimensions as the population grows to a point where it's just exponentially out of control. And then we'll have to talk serious things. Then when people are complaining, oh, no blood for oil, okay, well, what happens when it's blood for water? Mm-hmm. Then it becomes a completely different story. Exactly. Then these resources are going to be fought and warred over. And I think that the people who are in charge of this country just got a head start. They just said, hey, this is going to happen eventually. We are going to have to, sit down and ration these things out. There's going to have to be some sort of population control or everyone on the planet's going to die. That's not a conspiracy theory, That's not Isaac Asimov. That's reality. That's the reality that we're living in right now, a planet that can no longer sustain the population that we grow on it, especially not in the way that we live now, the wasteful way, the idea that people invent the cure for a disease looking for money rather than the gratification of knowing that someone who's going to die of something completely for the fact that they were born into a poor family.
But what about these global elites who are setting up these policies, are they that short-sighted that they don't know that water, obviously water is not infinite, it's finite, it's cyclical, and so is everything else that we're talking about, all these energy resources. Are they so short-sighted to not see that this is destroying?
I can't answer for the Bilderberg group.
It is just a rhetorical.
I can only wonder what they think, but I think that the majority of people who are in power now are people who were handed the power by somebody else and who learn to rule over other people and see that as their place rather than being other people. You know, a revolutionary doesn't go places to, you know, to bring freedom to people. He finds it among them first. I think that's the difference, that we're not looking at this country for all the benefits that it has. Some people look at it like a beautiful lake, like, wow, this is something we can build on, that we can create. And other people are just looking to rape her for as much as they can get and then move on. So much so that they don't even want to be a citizen of the country anymore, so they don't have to pay those taxes. Right. People who love America so much, but they don't want to pay anything into the program. You know, you can't have it both ways. If you want to have a gigantic military industrial budget, then, you know, the Romneys of the world got to put up that bread. You know, and then if you want to swing to the left and use the alternate criticism, then you have to say, you know, when you're a limousine liberal, you're going to have to get out of that car and get your hands dirty sometimes if you really want to be the change in the world that you say that you want to see.
I think it is inspiring to know that humans have created everything that we see up until this point, so we do have the ability to change it collectively. Right. I mean,
well, some conspiracy theorists don't believe that. They think aliens helped us back in the day. And I always had this funny conversation. I was like, look, B, if aliens helped us all build the pyramids, we were all in, you know, horses and buggies about 150 years ago, and now you're on the moon. So who did aliens really help, you know, us or you? So, I mean, at some point, you know, aside from all the conspiracy and all the conjecture, I think what's important to realize is that we need to evolve to a point where we consider us a human race, not different races of people that we can demonize and use things about their culture so that we feel less guilty for killing them. No, look at them. Say, this is a person just like me, who had a mother just like I did, who wants the same things I want, and I killed him because I was ordered to do so. Now, if you find that justifiable, the person you're looking at in the mirror is not a human being anymore. You've become a machine, you know? And we need to get away from that. We need to embrace our humanity more.
Extending our empathy past just nation states,
right,
I think is really, and that's part of the conditioning and why we're at the place we're at. Thanks so much for coming in and talking to us.
I appreciate you very much having me here.
Very awesome.
And, you know, you didn't get to hear her cursing rant off the air. But...
My Bill O'Reilly rant. That was Immortal Technique.
Thank you very much.